Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. And welcome to our day, stepping into action. And as you all know, we had invited Polly Higgins, a woman symbolizing positive action in beauty and light, speaking truth to power, a woman working to restore our faith in a justice system that protects life instead of being a tool in the hands of those in power. And today we are here to remember Polly, to celebrate Polly, and to take on the baton. And we are passing on this baton to two colleagues and friends that were very close to Polly to hold this morning. We will also be seeing an interview that some of you might know, which was made this February for the Power of Community Online Summit, which is one of the strands that actually led into this conference. And it's also one of the strands that is leading out of this conference with a community of around 10,000 people connecting, and this will grow into next year. And Polly's interview was one of the ones that just really helped me align myself. So I'll pass on to Lisa Mead, and then Claire will speak too.
Good morning. So like many in the room, I've been grieving for Polly's loss this week, and I'm very honoured to have the chance to stand here and give her a blessing from me personally, but also from all of us. She was a friend and a mentor to me. The reason I got involved in the Earth Rights movement about 7 years ago. And when I thought, what was it? What was the quality of being that she had that was so engaging and illuminating? And what it came down to for me was that she had this fierce intellect combined with a very open, warm heart, a very generous person with her time and her wisdom. So I feel the tradition that I follow is called the Kelagé tradition. It's an esoteric spiritual tradition from these islands, from the west coast, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and more the western side of the British Isles, from the Celtic lands. And I felt Polly was a very strong Celtic woman, no question about that. So I wanted to honor her with some blessings from this tradition and open the morning to bring some of the indigenous wisdom from these islands to this space. I also brought this wonderful stone owl. And she or he is not from these islands. She's from the northern territories of Canada, I believe, Tuktoyaktuk. So with this, one of the 5 totem animals from the Celtic and British traditions, the owl was the harbinger of death, but also an animal that held great wisdom. And I felt he or she was appropriate to bring today for Polly. So this will be our ally, our totem animal for this morning, and also to invoke Polly's presence. Because in this tradition, it's believed that the soul takes 50 days to really leave the earth. So I strongly feel Polly's presence is with us. And Polly, I hope you don't mind being represented as an owl. But it felt appropriate. It's about wisdom and discernment and change and transitioning from one realm to another. And also taking advantage of situations that seem disadvantageous. And this was something Polly definitely taught me in the Earth Rights movement, was to find the places that look like all hope is lost, but you can find some magic and creativity in that. So I will open by lighting the candle, honouring the elements. I will sing a chant in Gaelic, which I'll translate. Whatever I say in Gaelic, I'll translate for you. And I will also invite you to join me in a faun, which is a chant, a song, which means that it has 3 meanings: song, the land, and state of mind. And in the Celtic tradition, there's no separation. Land, state of mind, and song are all one. An enamanchi azarscha, gun toshach, gun crioch, an chi shirich. An enamanchi azarscha, gun toshach, gun crioch, an chi shirich. An enamanchi azarscha, gun toshach, gun crioch, an chi shirich. In the name of the highest being, highest intention, without beginning, without end, the highest being, highest intention. Beanach Mocarchus, Nahul Abiol, a Kerevin Gleish. Greetings to my companions of the fourfold green enclosure. So this blessing is used when people pass from this realm to the next. and it means blessings of God on the souls of the dead. Be'anach je lehanamana marav 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 Be'anach je lehanamana marav. Blessings on you, Polly. May you rest in peace.
Is this on? Yes. This may or may not work. I've not had a voice for 4 days, and I might turn into a coughing fit or a pouring, crying person or a snot waterfall, so we'll see. There'll be a lot of people in this room that deeply loved Polly. And as Lisa said, it's a huge privilege to share something of that love. And after we've shown the video, there'll be a chance for everybody to share their appreciations and their words. I want to talk about Polly the woman, because she was, I'm just going to cry, it's just going to happen. She was just the most outrageously brilliant, effervescently beautiful, unstoppable, apparently, audacious and vulnerable people I've ever known. She didn't like to show her vulnerability. She loved to be the laughter, and she had a wicked sense of humor, like outrageous sense of humor, and it carried her. It carried her through periods of intense depression, because, you know, why was she so fierce? Why was she so brilliant? Why was she so driven? Because it mattered. This world mattered to her so, so much. And she would do those patches of depression pretty much solo. And she'd report back afterwards that she'd survived them. But it's very easy to think about her as, you know, just this indomitable creature on the stage calling the world to account. But she was so much more than that. You know, I first met her, it was before the ecocide part of her life. She was doing Trees Have Rights too, and I was just hatching Tree Sisters, and the big difference between us with our huge visions was she knew what she was doing. And I remember we were both sitting there, and she was sharing and I was sharing, and she was sharing and I was sharing, and the more she shared, I felt smaller and smaller and smaller. Not because I was smaller, but because I recognized mastery. And I didn't have any. I just had balls. That was it. And but she had mastery. She knew what she was doing. She knew the legal system. She knew the world was condoning things that should never, ever be condoned. And it was just not acceptable to her. And so the thing I most want to talk about is her courage. And it's the thing that makes us all so relieved when there's a leader in the room who takes up the baton because you don't have to. There's that thing of, so long as Nelson Mandela's alive or David Attenborough's alive or, these people are alive, then they're holding something for the rest of us. And then when they go, what are we going to do without them? And Polly stood in a place that has no name. That place that I call the gap. The gap that is the split in human consciousness where denial and manipulation and cruelty and power over and the condoned death of people and planet sit. That place that is just so friggin' painful to acknowledge in ourselves. She chose to stand in that gap. She put her body in that gap, and I'm quite sure it's one of the reasons why she's left us so early, because nobody should stand in that gap on their own, but so few people are willing to stand in the place that has no name and alchemize that poison through their body and stand there and say, and I shall not move until this changes, until this gap closes, until we live in a way that is fundamentally respectful of everyone and everything. She's right. She's just so right about crimes against nature, crimes against humanity, and the just full wrongness of tar sands and fracking and all of these things that have almost been made illegal. Ecocide was almost passed twice before, except the tar sands got in the way and fracking got in the way. And I think it was almost passed in 1971, which was the year I was born. But there's always a couple of countries that refuse because there's some ghastly process that they need. They figured out another way of raping our world to make money and kill everything. And so they get away with it. And on Polly's watch, it was, no, we just don't, it's not all right to get away with this anymore. It's not all right. And of course it's not all right, but how many of us have got the balls to stand there in front of these people who think they've got so much power because they've got money and just say it's not all right, and then have the brilliance and the legal mind and the understanding of the system to be able to really do that thing. That was Polly. In a way, that's a remarkable form of alchemy. To stand in the gap. And, having spent time in London at the Extinction Rebellion last week, that's what they're doing. It's what's actually happening now. Extinction Rebellion is standing in the gap. They're standing in the denial place while people are walking around like, oh, you're such a nuisance, while they're standing on behalf of all of us. Everyone, whether we're awake, asleep, in denial, overwhelmed, whatever we're doing, they're standing for a truth. And it's like being invisible, like being the call, constantly being the call, where everyone was just like, don't ask me to change, don't ask me to change. And we get to change now. Now we get to change. As Jonathan said, the genie's out of the bottle. And Polly was like the genie and the bottle for me. She'd be so pissed off if she knew I was crying, which she probably does, but it's tough, okay? So she died with a mischievous smile on her face, which helps my heart. And I said to Jojo, who's her dearest number 2, what now with the work? And she said if Polly had gone even 4 weeks before, we wouldn't have been ready. But the strategy is in place, and the team is in place, and we're ready, and we're taking action. And she was a fundamental force in the rebellion in terms of really helping people understand their legal rights and like helping the whole mechanism of getting yourself arrested and understanding like that whole courage of putting yourself in the gap. Like she was training people to put themselves in the gap. And then this cancer, which she was given 6 weeks, she took 3. It was so fast, so fast. And the powers that be were trying to get rid of her. There were attempts on her life in the last 6 months. She survived each one of them, but no doubt they would have kept going. And in a way, maybe she's had the last laugh. She went on her own terms. She went with a smile on her face. And she got her shit well and truly together before she went, so that we can carry on the baton. And we get to carry the baton. And that, to me, is as much courage as we can find inside ourselves. And if we are all one, and I believe we are, then we all have Polly in here. We've all got access to immense courage. The refusal to stand by and watch injustice over people or planet. Like, no more standing by and watching and waiting for somebody else. It's up to each of us. You know, one of the things that Polly was frankly crap at was asking for help. She really was not good at asking for help or raising money. Because she just said, you know, I work for the planet can't pay. And it was one of the things I did for her. I raised funds for her. I'm a terrible fundraiser. It was good for Polly because it was easy, because it's Polly. And who wouldn't want to give money to the person who is trying to make it impossible for the powers that be to continue to do what they're doing and make it acceptable? But she didn't ask for help until afterwards. And so one of the things I take from her life, is no more going it alone for any of us. I mean, actually, it's a really crap excuse to just not do something. Because if we try and go it alone, our propensity to burn out or get lost in our own stories or believe our own inadequacy can undercut the brilliance that's trying to come through us. But if you attach yourself to the people that know you most, they're not going to let you forget your brilliance, and they're not going to let you fall asleep to your own dreams. And each one of us has got, you know, if we're incarnate now, if our souls chose to arrive right now for the biggest show on earth, you know, will humanity or will humanity not turn the evolutionary corner and shift from being so-called consumers to actual restorers, you know? And can we do it in like 5 years flat? Has there ever been a bigger agenda in all of our hands? And if we're here, if we're at this conference, it's because we've got a core part to play. We may not know what that core part is, but it's in here. It's encoded in us. We are it. The solution is here. And our togetherness and how we come together, how consciously we come together, the unique constellations that we can create in our lives can be really catalytic to bringing our individual brilliance through. Like, I really feel the time of our aloneness, trying to do it on our own. It's just, it has to be over. The odds are too great. The importance of our gifts coming forward has never been more important. So we need to not let our stories get in the way. We just can't afford it any longer, which means find people that believe in you. Or find anybody, even if they believe in you or not, and tell them to believe in you. And then start sharing what it is that's coming through you, and just keep sharing until you start, like, it becomes the thing that's living you. Like, unlock the river of your own brilliance in response to what's happening, and let life show you who you are. Polly's funeral is on Friday the 3rd of May. Everybody's welcome. It's in Stroud, where she moved to. No black is to be worn, and organic whiskey will be served. Walking boots are to be worn because it's a good old 45-minute hike from, I think, the church to the burial or the pub or whichever it is that she wants us to go to. And then there will be a huge party on June 30th, a celebration at the height of the summer for her. And I'll end by inviting you to, as we watch this video, to let her touch you, to let her in if you didn't know her. Feel for the quality of her soul. Let her change you. Let her be the key that she was for so many of us. Let her into your heart and let her passing touch you, because that's the passing of the baton. And I kind of want to invite us to put our hands out or put our hands up and say, yes, I'll take it. Will you take the baton of truth talking? Will you take the baton of standing, no matter how frightened you are? Will you take the baton of maintaining your sense of humor and your wild ridiculousness, your profound love of nature? And will you say, yes, I will step up in any way that life asks me to. I will take on Polly's mantle and let her life continue to live on through all of us and through her work. Thank you.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the online summit, Power of Community, Climate Change and Consciousness, exploring how we can pick up our responsibility at this time, build community around us, and bring our consciousness and full awareness to a climate changing world, finding solutions together. And today I'm really delighted to have one of these solution finders here with us, a brilliant woman called Polly Higgins. Welcome, Polly.
Thank you very much, Kusha. Delight.
And you began your career as a lawyer in London when you were a barrister specialising in corporate law. And it was only after you asked yourself, how do we create a legal international crime against peace. So I'm very glad to have you here with us.
Thank you.
And we'd love to ask you what moved you to study law in the first place. And when did you start noticing that the scales of justice were not well balanced in terms of what the world actually needs?
When I first came down to London, I was actually working for an art dealer, a lovely man, and he had started out life as a lawyer. And spent more and more time in art galleries and museums to the point that his father said, "Son, you're always going to be a crap lawyer. Why don't you go and do something far more artistic instead?" And hence he set up an art gallery, and anyway, I ended up working for him. And so when I said to him, I'm spending more and more time looking at law, and he said, Polly, you're crazy. Why do you want to be a lawyer when you could be involved in the art world? And I'd come from a very artistic background, and it was a kind of, I don't know, like a calling. Yeah, it was really deep within me. And I had no kind of legal background in my family. It was very arts orientated on the whole. And so it was rather like his calling was really into the arts world, from coming from a very legal background himself. And mine was the reverse. And in a way, it's kind of follow the white rabbits. So I applied. I had no money. I had a lot of debt from university, and I applied for funding to help me through law school in London and to go to bar school. And amazingly, I actually won the top awards for that. And that was kind of a sign that gave me confidence that maybe those interviewing me at the very least were convinced or confident that I could actually do something in that realm. I mean, I remember taking out of the library, as it was back then, the Charity Handbook, which was this big, thick tome, this high, and going through every single page to see what I could apply for funding. And it came down to 3 funding bodies that I could apply to. And I received funding from them all, which gave me enough of a kickstart to actually get to law school and then subsequently to bar school, and hence my career at the bar was launched. But it was following a gut instinct. It was a sense that it's where I was meant to be going.
Yeah, I think many of us will be able to relate to that.
Yeah.
But also, that story of success in applying, finding those 3 bodies that could give funding and putting so much care into those applications that 3 were successful, which bodes well for the work you're doing on the ecocide law. So I'm just really curious where you are with that today. How far have you progressed? I've heard about mock trials. How has the process been?
Yeah. Well, we've actually just back in December in The Hague at the annual assembly for the International Criminal Court launched an independent preliminary examination. And in effect, we've opened up a case file which will be submitted into the International Criminal Court later this year. And that case file is actually to investigate climate crime and to establish whether or not it could stand as an existing crime against humanity, or whether or not it requires to be a standalone crime of ecocide in its own right. And that's groundbreaking for a number of reasons. And indeed, we've got a number of lawyers and organizations that are now backing this and supporting it. And we're building on the evidence that already exists out there that other international legal organizations have actually brought to the fore. All we're doing is we're presenting the legal argument, if you will, to say that it's missing time. So we launched that, and that's very interesting, because also what it allows us to do is examine evidence that's already out in the public domain. It is accepted and indeed approved by all governments now with climate issues that under the recent IPCC report that came out last year, that we have just 12 years to make rapid reductions, and that has to be undertaken very fast. And there are a number of bodies of research and report that we're actually relying upon or presenting into the International Criminal Court, one of them being the Carbon Majors report, which is years of work that was put together by the Climate Accountability Institute in America, which identifies the major carbon majors, the major perpetrators of carbon emissions. And that actually comes down to over 70% of our carbon emissions have been caused and are being caused as a result of a whole body, a whole industry actually, a whole body of companies. 100 companies are actually causing over 70% of our carbon emissions, which is phenomenal when you look at it in that way.
Yeah.
It comes down to identifying at source who are the major perpetrators. And the primary perpetrators under that tends to be fossil fuel. And under that, then we're looking at one company in particular. And indeed, because it's criminal law, then it's identifying individuals within those companies who carry what's called superior responsibility, the senior officials who take responsibility for what the companies are doing. And so we're examining Shell. And we've identified as the primary suspects the CEO of Shell Netherlands and CEO of Shell International. We're also looking at the political remit as well. And so because we're looking at a Dutch company, we're looking at the Dutch climate minister and the failure of the responsibility to protect in that country. And this is very important because this is already enshrined in our law, that there is a responsibility to protect humanity against crimes against humanity. And if ecocide is recognised as a crime against humanity, then we're looking at an absence of that duty of care that has to be remedied. And in particular, because these fossil fuel companies are being allowed to continue to perpetuate dangerous industrial activity that's exacerbating climate change, then we have a very serious issue on our hands. But to compound that, there's another body of evidence that's been brought forward by the Centre for International Environmental Law. And that's a whole body of evidence that demonstrates that the whole of the fossil fuel industry knew since the 1980s and actually earlier that, and on the advice of their own climate experts, their dangerous industrial activity will facilitate climate collapse. Now, it's one thing to have that knowledge. It's what you do with that knowledge that really matters. And what is suggested at the evidence that we're examining just now is not only that the fossil fuel industry knew, but the suggestion is that the fossil fuel industry then financed a huge global campaign to cause confusion to society as a whole with regards to climate issues, thereby enabling them to continue with business as usual. That is a very serious atrocity, especially where the consequences under the recent IPCC report are that we're looking at, on the current trajectory with business as usual, a 4-degree increase in temperature. And indeed, once you get to 4 degrees increase in temperature, it's runaway. It just escalates after that. So if we are to reduce from 4 degrees down to 1.5 degrees, you're looking at having to slash 70% of your carbon emissions. And when we're looking at the fossil fuel industry being the 70% contributor, it's very obvious where those cuts have to be made. And so we want to examine whether or not this is climate ecocide, either under the existing remit of crimes against humanity, or whether or not it actually requires a new standalone international crime of ecocide to bring that sort of prosecution. One of the roles of the International Criminal Court is preventative. It's not so much about punishment here, but it's actually to prevent more serious harm from accruing further down the line. So it's about how, where political will fails, and that's why we're looking at the political arena as well, can the rule of law prevail? And by submitting later in this year into the ICC this case file and bringing together a number of organisations and possibly even countries who want to submit this, then we will be able to actually address this issue very fast, which is very helpful.
It's amazing listening to it. I just noticed how my heart opens in this renewed belief in the system of justice, and that this would even be possible, which, you know, it's only then that I become aware how hopeless I had become around, you know, decision makers actually taking on responsibility for their decisions.
Yeah.
And that's really touching to notice. You know?
Yeah. I really understand that, Kosha. And I think a lot of people feel that sense of overwhelm and hopelessness, especially in the face of political inaction. This is a very big problem.
And also just noticing, on the other hand, how international trade agreements have been set up that keep governments captive, and bring them to courts when they do things that actually harm those big corporations. So it's also different parts of the justice system standing against each other, I guess.
Well, this is very interesting, because also this is about the attempt, kind of corporate hijack of the political system through using civil litigation and international agreements. International criminal law, however, overrides all international trade agreements, because they're just civil documents. And that's very important, because criminal law is about justice, and it is not, it supersedes, in the hierarchy of law, it supersedes all other legislation. And that's why we think this is absolutely vital, that this is taken into the International Criminal Court now to examine whether or not it actually constitutes an existing crime against humanity, or has to be a standalone crime in its own right. We're dealing with most unique circumstances for the 21st century. Unlike the 20th century, where genocide, for instance, is situational specific. You can identify the territory of a given country where genocide is occurring. You can identify the timeline. You can identify often even ballpark numbers of how many thousands of people or hundreds of thousands have been killed. But when we're looking at ecocide, actually in the 21st century, specifically when we're looking at climate ecocide, the parameters are very different, because the consequences of the actions that have been undertaken by dangerous industrial activity are, they transcend time and space. They're not specific to just one territory, one country, one patch of the earth. As we know, we can have rising sea levels as a result of melting ice happening in the Arctic, and yet it's the small island developing states in the Pacific, many thousands of miles away, that are most adversely impacted. As we know, carbon emissions remain in the atmosphere for many hundreds of years. So what has been allowed to continue from the 80s and earlier, in the knowledge that it will facilitate climate collapse, will have long-term adverse significant impact for generations further down the line. So it's in terms of spatiality, it's a whole different framework of applicability that we have to look at as to how we apply law now, either existing law or create new law for this. And it's urgently required now. This we know. And indeed, it's even accepted by governments. The IPCC report last year has been approved by all governments.
Yeah.
So there is no reason for governments to sidestep this. No.
Yes. Yeah, so it sounds as if your work could be hugely impactful. And, many of my colleagues also in the Global Eco-Village Network are deeply and fully involved in the Earth Rights movement. And I would love if you could explain to us how the Earth Rights movement and the Ecocide project, how they work together or fit into each other.
Complement each other very, very much. As you can see behind me, the wonderful banner that's been to many climate marches. I was actually explaining this in a talk in The Hague recently, how law is like a coin. A coin has two sides. And especially when you're looking at human rights law, the right to life, which is our most important right, and of course here we are wanting to extend the right to life not just to humans but to all beings to the earth. Our human right to life is governed on the other side of that coin, the flip side of the coin, by the criminality, the failure to take responsibility to protect against being killed. So it's governed by murder, or in America,
homicide, and
collectively then it's genocide. And so if we're to extend the right to life to the earth and all beings, then you're looking at the governance of that being through the criminality of ecocide. And that's what gives it its enforcement. If you don't have the corresponding criminality which imposes the legal duty of care, it's the imposition of care, and when that failure of responsibility to protect then occurs so that you can take action to bring justice into being, then actually those rights have no legal teeth. So my work on ecocide gives that legal underpinning that's required to give enforcement for the whole earth rights narrative, if you will. And not just earth rights, interestingly, we're looking at indigenous rights as well here, because this is a huge problem for the indigenous world. The right to self-determination and so on and so forth is not underpinned by criminality when there's a failure to protect their land, their way of life, their cultural way of life. Cultural ecocide is a very important aspect of the work that I'm dealing with as well. It's not just about land being destroyed, it's about a way of life for all beings in that territory, and sometimes outside of that territory as well, that are adversely impacted far further down the line.
Yeah, so there's something about culture side, which...
Yeah, cultural ecocide,
cultural ecocide,
yeah. Genocide, when it was first put in place, was supposed to have a cultural component, cultural genocide, and that was removed at the very last moment. And the lawyer who had drafted genocide reputedly howled and said that you have, what were his words? You have thrust the soul of my being into the ashes of the earth and trampled on it. And I think he must have felt that painfully, because he always believed that genocide could happen without even one person being killed. To destroy a way of life is a cultural genocide. And that greatly informed me with the drafting of cultural ecocide, to bring back that very important component.
Beautiful. Yeah, and you say that it's not about closing down big industry, but making the problem into the solution.
Yeah.
Explain?
Yeah, well, this is the interesting thing. With international criminal law, what you're doing is you're fundamentally closing the door in one direction, which allows it to be opened in another direction. For fossil fuel industry, for instance, it's energy. An energy company can reinvent its wheels. It can, instead of being dirty energy, it can become a clean energy. So there's an opportunity there. It also creates a level playing field right across the world. There are exceptions. There are countries that aren't signatories to the International Criminal Court who may decide to continue with their dirty fossil fuel industries, what have you, but they will become very marginalised. Financing of it will become increasingly difficult because most financiers are international in any event and don't want to touch something that's recognised as an international crime. And what it does is it facilitates and enables the innovation in the other direction to actually become the normative rather than the exception. It makes it easy then to flow into that different slipstream, if you will, rather than being stuck on a never-ending wheel of dangerous industrial activity. It becomes then, instead of being a vicious cycle of harm, if you will, it starts to become a virtuous cycle of harmony.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's all those young, intelligent people that already are unwilling to bring their intelligence and brilliance into the oil industry, really turning the intelligence of humanity towards solution and away from destruction.
Very much. And there's a lot of skilled people in those industries that can use those skills to clean energy instead of dirty energy.
Yes. Yeah, it's also this bringing back the belief that technology and innovation can be part of a beautiful future where we really use our intelligence in much more sensitive ways. So, yeah, beautiful.
Absolutely, yeah.
And also you speak about the sacred trust of civilization.
Yeah.
It's been there for hundreds of years, I believe. Yeah. And that describes how we are meant to be guardians of life.
Yes.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about that, and also how it relates to each and every one of us.
Yeah,
Who is also watching this now.
yeah. It's a very ancient tenet in law, and indeed, written documents, as far as I can find out, go back to the 16th century. But it goes back into the annals of time because it's premised on guardianship, trusteeship principles. And that really is the starting point. The whole idea of ownership and property is an artificial construct invented by lawyers in order to determine who has control over a given territory or land or property. But prior to that, this sacred trust was recognized. And it really fascinated me when I was researching this for my first book, that it's a sacred trust. It's not just a trust, trusteeship, guardianship, but it's sacred. The sanctity of life, the sanctity of our way that we engage with our land, our world, our community. And this actually has its threads throughout history, and indeed the precursor to the setting up of the United Nations, the League of Nations, had it enshrined quite explicitly the sacred trust of humanity, to hold all beings in trust and enable all inhabitants to flourish on this earth. It was modified then in the subsequent United Nations Charter, but it's there nonetheless, and it's a hugely overlooked principle. And this is the thing, it's a principle. It hasn't got the governance. You remember I was talking about the coin, what is it that gives it the enforcement? And it's somewhat there in terms of we have human rights, but it's the expansion, out to earth rights, and then giving it its governance through the international criminal laws to underpin that. For me, it's a kind of universal wisdom. It's a higher wisdom, if you like. And in a way, what I'm doing is realigning law to take it back in alignment with that sacred trust that we all hold in our hearts as we look out into our world around us. And, this all comes down to the duty of care. A duty of care is a collective responsibility. It's not, and that is about viewing ourselves as trustees, as guardians, as stewards, if you will, not just for ourselves, but for future generations. What do we choose to do with our lives that then lays down the seeds or allows something to flourish that others, ourselves and others, will greatly benefit from in future years without causing harm? The first do no harm principle playing in here. Because if you are upholding a sacred trust, then surely it has to be premised on a first do no harm principle. How could something be held as sacred without it being recognized as something that must not be abused or exploited? So it seems to me, in a way, what I'm doing here is realigning human law with higher law, with natural law, if you will, to bring those scales of justice back into kilter. They've been knocked out of kilter for quite some time. And indeed, if you look at the trajectory of the evolution of law, certainly from the 1950s, law has kind of almost accelerated beyond all comprehension, with the number of pieces of legislation nationally and internationally being put in place, and that the majority of it has actually been financed by industry, rather than it being taken forward on the basis of what's in the best interest for humanity and the earth as a whole, in terms of looking forward for future generations, coming from a place of a duty of care, collective stewardship, rather than who can make the most amount of money out of this in the shortest time possible.
Yes,
it's different between property law and trusteeship law.
Yeah, so instead of protecting profit, it's about protecting life again.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's exactly that. Yes.
Yeah. And also, as you speak about these going back into the annals of time, I was just thinking how this feeds into the wisdom of the indigenous people.
Yeah.
Guardianship of Earth. It's where we come from and where we long to go back.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's for me, it touches a deep point, and I'm not sure how easy this might, but somehow as you speak about the duty of care, and I've also listened to your TEDx talk, which I would encourage other listeners also to go and check out. But, you speak about the duty of care also in the face of climate change as disasters hit more often, more regularly, and especially places, that are very far away from the places where climate change was caused, that there is a duty of care. And, it's so, to me, it's such an interesting journey to come from colonialism and slavery to a duty of care in the climate change that we have created.
Yeah.
In the West, I'm speaking about the West, about the USA, about, where, and I'm touched by it. I'm touched also by, this responsibility of our leaders, but I'm also have questions about our responsibility as individuals, who choose these leaders. And just wondered whether you would like to share more about that realm. It's not a precise question, I'm just also thinking about, I heard lately that Jeremy Corbyn, the UK leader of the Labour Party, proposed to bring a more critical exploration of the British Empire and the British colonial past into the UK schools, and was heavily criticised for that. And I'm just wondering how we can also, or we need to also, really own up the colonial past as we move forward into a duty of care around climate change.
Yeah, this really resonates, actually. That's really interesting that Jeremy Corbyn gets criticised for that as well, because in a way what he's saying is, let's face the shadow of our history here and the harm that it caused. Rather than it being a positive narrative, we were the great empire. We talk about
broad civilization.
Yes, and yet it was built on control, horror, terror, vast expropriation of land and territory at gunpoint and sword point and knife point, and pillaging. It's not a pretty story, and slavery really went big thanks to the UK, thanks to Great Britain and its colonial outposts. I often find it very interesting how, in a way, that whole kind of colonial mentality still continues in the Western world, in particular when I look at existing business practices and political practices. The fact that we don't have proportional representation is because our first past the post system is an old colonial system, which is manifestly unfair and unjust, and therefore doesn't give proper representation, political representation, for instance. So we're left with a system that was shaped very much in colonial times, the time of the colonial empires, and still has an impact in terms of how businesses are run, in terms of how our politics is run, and in terms of how we fail to treat our earth. It's a very colonial mentality to take and take again. That's the abrogation of responsibility. The knowledge and yet turning the blind eye, knowing but continuing anyway. In the case of fossil fuel companies, the evidence that we're looking at suggests that it wasn't just a matter of turning a blind eye, it was a matter of manipulating that information to cause confusion within society. So confusion is one issue, that people can be very confused over these issues because of the misinformation that's being disseminated frequently through mainstream media. But in a way, this is also about how we take self-responsibility in our lives for how we live our lives. What is it that we do that contributes to a better world? Even at the most micro level, whether it comes down to the self, the family, the community, that matters because it has huge ripples outwards. How we bring up our children, of course, has huge implications for the future. And so it's really a process of self-examination, which is a challenge. There's nothing easy about self-examination, especially when one chooses to take responsibility for one's own actions and starts taking responsibility at a very fundamental level, self-care, health and well-being, and then looks towards the care of the immediate community around and so on and so forth. And by way of extension of that, then the same values and principles and ethics actually then dictate how you're going to view the world. Because this is all driven by conscience at the end of the day. If you have a conscience on these issues, then to actually operate within a world that is driving along the lines of undertaking hugely harmful activity, it creates a cognitive dissonance. It creates huge discomfort if you have a conscience on these issues. You begin to actually question, should I be driving a fossil fuel car? I really don't want to, but we have a government that hasn't put infrastructure in place to allow something better to be used instead. This is a challenge. If you have a conscience on these issues, these are parts of the challenges. Now, in law, the responsibility is really with those what's known as those with a position of superior responsibility, those officials, senior officials, whether or not it's CEOs, directors, ministers, heads of state, who are making the decisions that can have significant adverse impact on society at large. And so, it's kind of tiered, if you like. Who has a superior responsibility? Whom have we voted in with that superior responsibility to make those decisions on our behalf? And what do we do when those decision makers are failing to address those issues? And this is where something like the Extinction Rebellion really comes into play. Here in the UK and now internationally, where people are actually willing to actually create roadblocks and the like to draw attention to the fact that the government is failing in its responsibility to protect humanity against possibly the world's largest ever crisis. And yet it's all eminently preventable. And this is the thing that put in the right law in the right place and it can all turn in a pinhead. And that's really what ecocide crime is about. But also, it does require a certain element of conscience to do that. If you care about these issues as a politician, what have you, you will engage with it. If you don't, you're not. And so this is very telling as well. Where are we going with this? Who is it that's engaging with it? Who is it that doesn't want to engage with it? And inevitably, those who are most adversely impacted have direct visceral experience. For them, it's a humanitarian crisis when you're looking at climate collapse and you live in a small island developing state and you have escalating floods, tsunamis, what have you, rising sea levels. But it's all too easy to sit in houses of parliament and, the Senate or wherever and ignore it. Especially if it doesn't bother your conscience terribly much. So it's a question of conscience as well here. And it's our conscience that informs the actions we take in our lives and how we choose to engage with life actually as well.
Yeah, it's like those everyday actions, but also that we need to transform the systems that we are a part of and that inform our actions.
Yeah, absolutely.
To work on both levels. And somehow, Joanna Macy was speaking about the story of David and Goliath. And somehow I see you as a David going in to this big, system of law,
It feels like that.
Yeah, because the powers that be won't be happy for you to come. And, the CEOs of Shell will not welcome you with open arms, as you make them into criminals. And I'm sure, as you name that there is criminal action that they have been involved in from this point of view. So how do you feel? How safe do you feel with this? Are you sometimes afraid as you go into these places? What is the kind of support that you receive or that you would love to receive? Also, as a woman in such a, vulnerable position, you're really facing the powers that be.
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge. The safety in this exponentially increases with the more people who come on board to support it. It kind of creates, it's almost safety in numbers, if you like. But now that we've launched this case file for climate crime, it's out there. And more organizations and progressive lawyers, judges, former judges, forensic experts, climate scientists are coming on board and saying, okay, we want to be seen to support this. And so that's very important. The kind of mobilizing of those who are more progressive in this field, who understand the necessity to preempt what's coming and what has been clearly identified evidentially in science and fact as going to come unless it's stopped. So that preventability element is recognized by a number, not just within the legal world, but also the scientific world, for instance, as being absolutely critical to act now. Remember, the International Criminal Court has very much, one of its key roles is as a preventative actor, if you will, to prevent, something far worse happening further down the line, to try and step in before it's too late. And so actually the fact that there's more and more momentum growing around this case file, climate crime case file, is very reassuring. And it also means that, actually, once we've submitted this can be run by a number of organizations, individuals in any country they want, and addressing any number of dangerous industrial activities that are happening.
And would you like to share a bit more about how you take care of your personal resilience as you walk this path? You look so well, while doing all of this. You look so well.
The great thing is I live in Stroud, and Stroud is a very ecological town here in the UK, which is absolutely fantastic. And my husband and I moved here 5 years ago and love it. And I'm surrounded by fantastic people, healers, different modalities of all kinds, from quite conventional to the utterly unconventional, and great things happening at any given point in time. So I have a whole raft of individuals around me who really help me in the self-care department, and it's really important. It really is, because I think this happens when you're living and breathing a huge purpose like this, that it's very easy to become very run down, just spend a couple of weeks in bed nursing a very bad cold, although very nice to actually take a bit of time out. And so other things matter to me. Organic food, biodynamic food really, really matters to me. It was one of the reasons I wanted to move down here, that the Centre of Biodynamic Food in the UK, Biodynamic Association, have their headquarters across from here. And it's a very ecological town. It's no surprise that the two main renewable energy companies are based down here, for instance. We even have the world's most ecological village circus, Gifford Circus here, which is fantastic. It's organic, which is absolutely brilliant, and they are brilliant. And so there's something, it's a very ecological community. I live in one of the valleys here, surrounded by a community of people who are doing fantastic things in a valley where, you know, no chemicals or pesticides are used, where the woodland is protected under trust, where, you know, biodiversity is vibrant and flourishing, and that all really, really matters to me, that I connect with earth that's being nurtured as well. It's a little patch of paradise, and that's very important for me, to actually be living somewhere that really nourishes my soul. And I'm surrounded by people that nourish my being, and vice versa, I hope. And that it's a very vibrant community who are engaging with the same values locally as well as globally. It's a place where I don't have to justify my values, and that's fantastic, you know. And there are pockets of this all over the world, far more than we actually realise. I mean, Findhorn's an incredible example of that. You know?
Yeah. I mean, that's the work of the Global Eco-Village Network.
Yes.
So really that's a beautiful segue into probably the last question, is about this communities, you know, and how do communities play a role in safeguarding and protecting their environments?
Well, I think this is part of it, is that, you know, this is a choice, a lifestyle choice. I choose to actually live in an area that's living in the vision of how I want the world to be, to function, to operate. And that's vital to me. It's easy here to access healthy, organic, biodynamic food. It's easy to connect with land that hasn't been despoiled by chemicals and pesticides. You can't say that about many, many areas in the UK or you know, internationally. And I choose to support my local farmers market on a Saturday and go and buy my vegetables from Gelda's organic stall rather than going to a supermarket. You know, it's conscious choice. I choose to use the local health food store and the local, you know, the local stores, local independent ones, rather than, you know, and engage with, you know, local transition town initiatives and what have you, rather than buy online off, you know, anonymous Amazon, what have you. This is, you know, support the little independent bookstore, for instance, order books through that. This is all part and parcel of the conscious choice making of choosing to actually live in the way I want to see the world remaining flourishing, rather than saying, oh, I wish it was like that, but sadly I'm not living it. Because if I'm not living it, then I'm not contributing to it. In fact, if anything, I'm complicit in its demise. So it's very proactively kind of stepping out of that, you know, that wheel, that mouse wheel that goes round, where you get stuck in a system that you don't like, but here you're stuck in it because, you know, this is my job, this is my world, this is where I live, and this is the way everyone operates, and saying, well, I refuse to do that. You know, it's like people who are permaculturalists, they are fundamentally unreasonable. And I love that. I really love because they refuse to accept what is. You know, at some point, a permaculturalist has said, I refuse to eat chemically sprayed vegetables out of a plastic package out of a supermarket. So I'm going to go and grow my own, you know. And that's absolutely fantastic, because it is this kind of breaking of the pattern of harm, refusing to be complicit with it and saying, I'm not going to live my life like that. And that's absolutely critical here, because the more we stay within the what is, the more we perpetuate the what is. It's the actual breaking of the pattern, saying, no, enough, no more, and stepping out of it. And in a way, it's precisely what I'm doing with law, is I'm saying, no, enough, no more. We break that pattern and we put a spoke in the wheel of that one, and we create, you know, we break the vicious cycle so that the virtuous cycle can then emerge and flourish instead. No.
Thank you. I think actually that's a beautiful point to end this conversation. It feels really beautiful how you brought together the big vision of law transformation together with all these beautiful small places where people are actually transforming their guardianship, their care of duty, where they live. Yeah. Thank you so much, Polly.
No, you're most welcome. It's an absolute honour and a delight, really, Kasia. And I look forward to seeing you very soon, hopefully in April in Findhorn.
Yes, at the Climate Change and Consciousness Conference here, for sure. Yeah, and we're all supporting you, and you have us all on your back. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This work.
Much appreciated. Much love. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Claire will be back in a moment. Thank you for all being unreasonable, as all of you here have been following your own inner guidance. I know there'll be time for just a few short comments, but the one I want to share is that I met Polly a few years ago in California, and I've had the privilege of being with activists all around the world, and I have never met someone who so lived Gandhian roots so profoundly and deeply. And it was so easy to experience why CEOs supported her and loved her, because they knew what they were doing, and they didn't know what to tell their kids, and so they were encouraging her success, because then they knew they could tell their board, you know what we're going to have to do now because of these laws, and they could tell their children what they wanted to be able to tell their children. So Polly lived that. I'll say the one hope I have is that one of the things we can do out of this conference is come up with the Polly Challenge. And that Polly Challenge is how to invite legal expertise and those of us who had the same yearning she did to change the fundamental laws as she invited to serve life, not to serve the old short-term paradigm that, they worked as best they could. And now, as she said, this consciousness is arising in all of us. And how do we help the legal system serve that so that Vandana and all the others you heard here speak can serve that. So, time for a few other voices.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. It's beautiful. We just want to make space for a few other voices, just people maybe who knew Polly well or were involved in the work, just to make a short tribute if you'd like to, and we'll just pass the mic around if anybody would like to contribute into this space. At the back here. Could we have a microphone over here? Thanks. And maybe just say your name and stand up and offer your tribute. Thank you.
My name's Susie Martineau, and I established a tree conference, and Polly was going to be our lead speaker this year in October. And so I was having an interview with her, and I was saying about various different legal strategies and for logging, because after the last tree conference, it just rose in my body. I just knew in my bones we could halt deforestation. I knew that we could do that. And so I immediately started looking around for legal strategies that could do it. And we had a big conversation on Skype. People were having a meeting downstairs, so she'd gone up to her attic and she was crouched down by the radiator. And I went through all the different things I'd been looking at. I said, what about this and these sanctions and these things and making it... And she explained that the majority of the fish that come into this country, they might come in with a stamp saying that they've been sustainably fished, but they're not. And that's much harder for trees, for logging, because trees can sit in a country for a little while and then to another one. And so by the time it gets passed through several countries, the tree comes to us as if it's sustainably logged, and it's not. And she went through all the different routes, and she won me. She won me that the only way that we were going to stop deforestation was if it was a crime. And I'm so grateful for that, because, and when she passed away, the feeling for me was shit. Because it was the only thing that I could see in the timescales required that could do what I knew can be done. And so I really want to support her, and I really invite anybody who knows people who have legal minds to let them know about the way that Polly works. And there are other organisations, like through the Gaia Foundation, there's the Earth Jurisprudence Movement, which is a whole network of lawyers in the UK who are working really beautifully. There's a lot of amazing different contributors towards this field. And in the Tree Conference this year, we'll be in Cambridge. We're hosted by the Fauna and Flora International. And if it is that you find people who you feel represent that work, and I can't believe at this whole conference I haven't met Mama Ito, but I really want to, I will pass it over. Then I'd really like to support bringing that stuff out and giving that a platform in October.
Thank you. Thanks, Susie. Who else would like to speak at this point? Anybody else? Maybe our hearts are very full. I know our hearts are very full. Yeah. You take the mic there, and then why don't you close?
I heard in Polly an incredible, as you said, intellect and heart that opened all of us in a way of just slicing through to pick up the string that would unravel the sweater, and completely alive in her own sphere of influence. And what I didn't hear in her was panic. And so I understand what Greta is doing. She's saying to people who are in denial, I want you to panic. Because they need to panic. They need to get out of denial. What I want to say to us is that we're not in denial. We don't need to panic. What was in Polly was an incredible strength and calmness. And we all need to strengthen that calmness from which we can pull the string within our own sphere of influence. None of us will be Polly, but we're all Polly within our world. We have to touch into that higher power and into our own strength through our own practice. We cannot let go of our spiritual practice, of everything that strengthens us, because it's too hard to fight. That is the indigenous knowledge. That is our indigenous wisdom, that we go back to prayer, we go back to ceremony, we go back to meditation to connect with the truth and our own power. And that is what I heard from Polly and wanted to bring forward from the last days of the conference. So thank you for hearing me.
So as ever, we run out of time. I think what hit me watching Polly again was this fundamental need to honor the sacred trust of life in our legal systems. That's not being done at the moment. And just in closing, I think Polly would have been talking about her Earth Protectors initiative, which wasn't mentioned in the interview. The last long conversation I had, very warm conversation with Polly, was when she was just launching the Earth Protectors Initiative. And I was in awe of what she had done. She said, I suddenly got a donation of £50,000, which I really needed, because I needed to spend £50,000 getting this trust deed notarized in every country on the planet. And that's what she did. All bar 3 countries, there is a trust deed that is for Earth Protectors to take advantage of. So if you go to the website, Earth Protectors, I don't know exactly what it is, but put Polly Higgins Earth Protectors, you will find it. You can sign up as an Earth Protector. The €5 or whatever you choose to donate will go to supporting the ecocide law, to make that a reality, and to also help the small island nations to protect themselves against climate change. So I really encourage you to do that. I looked at the website last night. I rushed to sign up when it launched, and I'm Earth Protector number 203. And there are now over 7,700 Earth Protectors. And it was Polly's dearest wish that that would rise to over 1 million as soon as it is possible. So, I think we need to close now, but...
What's incredibly important about the Earth Protector certificate? I just wanted to add to that, to really urge everyone to sign up. It has the same standing in law as the legal foundation for conscientious objection for those who refuse to fight in the 2 world wars, and we need that. We need to be able to have that in law. So I really urge everybody to get that certificate, because it has a standing in law that says, I won't do X or I will do Y because I'm an Earth Protector.
And this will become a key issue now with Extinction Rebellion, people being arrested. If you have this document, at least you can say, I'm a conscientious protector of the earth. That was how Polly articulated it. So I would like to invite us to close with a faun, a song, a chant, the land, the state of consciousness as it is in this beautiful Celtic spiritual tradition. It's just 2 lines. I will sing it. Please join in if you're able, and we'll close for a break. And yes, maybe stand. And the meaning of it is, O thou Mother God, your light, your wisdom, your magic, and magic in the sense of creativity, and bringing things into being. Ava heye, diolas halve, Ava heye, diolas halve, Ava heye, diolas halve. Diolas halve, Ava heye, diolas halve, Ava heye, diolas halve.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Polly. And we'll take a break now, and we'll be back at 11.
Sounds like you.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
It's much quieter there.
Okay.
Obviously, she was involved in something like that. She talked about it. How much?
So, do you know what's next?
That's fine.
we find her a ride to go and.
But I like, what I like the idea of is being able to take the wheels out.
Yeah. Well, it actually gives the teeth to what Greta is doing. So what Greta is doing. They stop the whole thing.
For a while, but they destroyed. Way bigger than tobacco industry, but they use that, as far as I understand, as the strategy for doing exactly what they in the last few weeks, what I think is interesting is Mark Carney.
Yeah.
A good Canadian. He is a Canadian. He is a Canadian. He is a Canadian.
I know.
Right.
Get him out of town. Run him out of town.
2 2 2 1 2 2 2 1 2 2 2 1 2 2 2 1 2 2 2.
Very good. Thank you for. No, that's okay.
2 2 2 1 2 2 2 1 2 2 2 1 2 2 2 2 2 2 2 2 2 2 2 2 1 2 2 2 1 2 2 2 1 2 1 2 2 1 2 2 2 2 2 2 2 2 2 1 2 2 2 2 1 2 2 2 1 2 2 2 2 2 1 2 2 2 1 2 2 2 2 1 2 2 2 2 hey 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 2 2 2 hey hey hey.
I'll pop lights up so you can see.
Two two 1 2 2 2 2 1 2 2 2 1 2 2 2 1 2 2 2 2 1 2 2 2 2 1 2 1 2 3 4 5 5 4 3 2 1 2 2 2 1 2
Come out tomorrow. Da 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 da.
Two 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 1 2 2 2 2 2 2 2 2 1 2 3 4 5 5 4 3 2 1
I was thinking just brightening up a little bit after.
I could probably sit on my journey. It's alright, we're going to be working there anyway. Alright, just remember sitting there. Yeah.
Testing? Testing? Is that working? Yeah. Perfect. Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you so much for doing this so that my hands are free. Makes it all much easier. Yeah.
Can we team to start getting people back?
It's already happening.
It's already happening?
Different touch the deck, right? Quite often we start. Oh, okay. through her life. My girlfriend says she sent a message yesterday saying, "Oh, I told you."
Do come on in and take another seat as quickly, as smoothly as you can. Welcome back. Let's just take a moment, as people are still arriving, just to also arrive fully in our bodies, in our hearts, in our minds, in our spirit. A very full and rich morning so far. Hearing about and witnessing the beautiful, strong work of Polly Higgins. Amazing warrior for the earth. Welcome back. So, very full, right? I feel my heart is very full. I feel like we're all very full. And we are going to make space now for more integration and also to take a little look at our personal resilience in these times. It's an extraordinary thing to watch this video interview. It was just done at the end of January with Polly, and here we are 3 months later in a very different reality. So it's also, I think, an invitation to really hold the preciousness of life. We never know when it will be with us and when it won't be with us. We do our work, we build our resilience, we do our best, and grace happens. And the unexpected happens. So in a moment, we're going to pass to Stephanie, who is, as we know, an expert in embodiment, resilience, has worked with a combination of Western and Eastern philosophy and medicine in order to bring an amazing philosophy and practice around how we can integrate some of these challenges and how we can integrate and build our personal resilience. So we're going to pass to Stephanie in a moment, but I just wanted to also flag a little bit how we're working with the program. Because Kosha and I spend a lot of time trying to tune in to what is needed next, which means that the program sometimes changes. So you will notice we are not about to go into what's on the program, which says Pro Action Cafe, because it felt more like we needed to be in a different space around resilience. And working with resilience, we'll also be going outside, probably for the second part of our morning, to do another exercise that's more also land-based and land-connected and nature-based. And in the afternoon, the first part of the afternoon here and the evening is also both called emergent spaces. And we will be listening with you as to what it is that is wanting to emerge from here. So there might be a little structure, I'm not quite sure yet. We will talk more about that, but it feels like we would need to listen to what is really emerging from here. We imagine that part of that in the evening might also involve some body work, some movement, some more embodied awareness and synthesizing what's happening in our bodies also. So many different possibilities, and there are workshops kind of sandwiched in between that. And also, of course, after lunch, there is an opportunity for those who wish to meditate to be part of a synchronized global meditation in the Upper Community Center. And that's going to be from 2:15. It starts really at 2:30 to 3:30. It's an hour-long meditation and prayer to transform kind of fear and shakiness into the light that can carry forward the impulses from this gathering. So many opportunities, again, to sense what is right for you as we go through our day. And things will unfold step by step by step. And the next step is to welcome Stephanie to help us with our own personal resilience. So please welcome Stephanie Mines once more.
When Polly died, or when I was given the news that Polly had died, I was shattered in the way that trauma shatters us, fragmented, separated into a million pieces. I could hardly tell where I was. And when I connected with my colleagues here, Robin and Kosha, who delivered the news to me, and I sank into the deep wells of their eyes, I believe at that moment I received the transmission that Polly's death was delivering for me. And I am certain that her death delivered transmission to each and every one of us. I hope that I can do service to that transmission that came to me with what it is that I'm going to share with you here. It's not that your transmission will resemble mine, because it will be unique to you. But what I want to impart to you will assist you in integrating the transmission and integrating the transmission of this entire gathering that you are holding. And in my awareness, you have actually held this gathering and will continue to hold its intention going forward. So Polly spoke of the duty of care, and she was also speaking of the precautionary principle. I'm married to an environmental attorney, so much of what Polly was talking about, I've been sleeping with for over 25 years. And whether I understood it or not, when I first met my husband, somehow his remarkable wisdom has seeped into my cells. That happens when you sleep with someone, right? Bob and I, environmental attorney Robert Yunke, he was supposed to be here. He's not. Due to his own personal health needs. He's going to be fine. He's going to be better than ever before, right, Alden? He's going to have a hip replacement. He and I fought Monsanto in Hawaii. We lost that particular battle. But as Bob and I worked with the communities there on Kauai, I became educated about the precautionary principle, which is the duty of care that legislators, people in this higher position of responsibility, have, if there is any threat to human health, in particular the health of small ones, it is the responsibility of people in positions of power to act in their interest and protect them. There is a parallel to that in the human body. So when those higher orders of responsibility fail us, as they have, all is not lost. Approaching them to take responsibility on the legal level is the direction of some. But it's certainly not everyone's direction. You are not here to do anything in particular other than what you are guided to do. And to do that, we want to access the vehicles of that responsibility that live in our bodies. I will assist you in activating them now. The precautionary principle, the higher order of responsibility to protect you from contaminants, is your immune system. And as Vandana Shiva said, our brains have been infected by the fossil fuel industry. We are going to decarbonize our inner climate now. That's what I'm here to share with you. How you can non-invasively, gently, and with your own hands decarbonize your inner climate. Come to standing, please. If you want to remain seated, you absolutely can. We can do this in standing or seated. If you're in standing and there's someone very close to you, just give each other a little space. Bring your feet approximately hip-width apart. Nothing is precise. It's just what feels right to you. Soften your knees. Let's move those shoulders a little bit and let them drop down, and let the arms swing by your sides with the fingertips pointing towards our mother, Gaia. And feel, whoa, thank you, Mom. Feel the vibration of Gaia coming up through the cells of your body, into your fingertips, into your arms. Allow that vibratory field to drop your shoulders and therefore widen your chest. Feel the movement across the clavicles. Soften your face. Let yourself be filled on the somatic level with Mother's passion to be in intimate relationship with you and guide you. Swing those arms above your head, interlock your fingers, and rotate them heavenward. If this is uncomfortable in any way, adapt. Be comfortable. Open your eyes. Look right in front of you. Look at what's there. We're going to swivel, but before we swivel, having swiveled inappropriately myself on occasion, knowing that it gets you into trouble, I'm going to tell you to soften your pelvis and drop a little bit more into your softened knees. With eyes level, we are going to rotate right to left, keeping the gaze steady. And as you rotate into one corner, stretch a little bit more without causing pain, feeling the joy of that stretch, that good hurt. And then you're going to rotate, keeping your eyes level. You stay on a level plane to the other side, giving yourself that same stretch on the other side. And looking backwards. Let's do it again. Eyes level, rotating. looking backwards, looking behind you with the same level gaze. And you can repeat this if you like. When you're ready, let your arms come down to your sides. And let's just feel into that. Just feel what's different in your body. And if anybody just wants to say out loud what they notice, just a word or two.
Release.
Strengthen. Spaciousness. Opened up. Vibrant. We have just stimulated the fluidity of primordial fire in our bodies. Primordial fire is an element that is not spoken of very often. It is the element of leadership. It is the element of individuality. It allows you to step in to the shoes of Polly Higgins, of Nelson Mandela, of Vandana Shiva, of Kosher Joubert, of Robin Alfred, of Stephanie Mines, of Jonathan Porritt, of Charles Eisenstein, in the form that is uniquely yours. Practice it. You are here to be a leader in your community. Remaining in standing, I invite you to take your right palm and bring it to the base of your ribs on the left side. And just feel that for a moment. Just nothing specific here. It's a general resting of the palm at the base of the ribs on the left side. And then with your left hand, come across your body to the bend of your elbow. And being comfortable, if you want to sit down, you can. You just be comfortable. Allow yourself to tune in to the cellular information that vibrates up from these sites, the base of your ribs, the bend of your elbow on opposite sides, for a moment. Let the information rise into your fingertips, into the soil of your body. The position at the base of your ribs on the left side activates, stimulates, nourishes, brings forth your ancient knowledge of assimilation. This is the end of the word overwhelm. Overwhelm means undigested. Let's enhance, expand our digestive, metabolizing, assimilative capacities. We need to do this. This is the evolutionary impulse, and it's available to us. This is the truth. Jonathan Porritt spoke about truth-telling in this era. The truth of the human body is that its resilience and expanded capacity is available to us no matter what. No matter what your age, no matter what illness you might have had, it's available, it's there, it's in your cells. The left area, it's number 14 in the system that I teach, awakens remarkable assimilative capacities on every level. Assimilation of food, assimilation of relationships, assimilation of information, assimilation of data. Feel it. Feel how that sight starts to articulate itself into your hands. Your hands know this. My teacher, Mary Eno Burmeister, who imparted this to me, said we don't learn it. We remember it. The place where your left fingertips are resting in the bend of the elbow is the site that my teacher called your bodyguard, otherwise known as boundaries. So we're combining assimilation with the ability to set boundaries. The word overwhelm is disappearing from our consciousness. As you metabolize and assimilate and create the boundaries you need to create so that you can do that successfully, where does overwhelm fit? Where does the word intense fit? If you can assimilate it, if you can create the space to assimilate it, then you own the moment. If you look at photographs of the Dalai Lama, you will frequently see him in this position. Think of what he has to digest and the boundaries he has to set to maintain his cheerfulness. That's available to you. What do you notice experiencing this? Let's hear it. Optimism. Deep calm. Resourcefulness, peace. Comfort.
I can't get enough
Yes! When I first learned this system, I called it my lover. I would take it to bed with me every night. I taught the system to my husband, so we all sleep together now. The resilient, expansive capacities of your body are endless. What I have to impart to you is part of what I call a cultural library of sustainable health resources. I do not feel like I know the only way to enhance resilience, but I know a way that has worked for me, and I want to impart that to you, but I'm also gathering other ways so that these can be collected and shared with communities that will inevitably, some now must, be responsible for their own health care and for the health care of their families and their villages. This is my follow-through, one of my follow-throughs. This came with the vision of climate change and consciousness, the vision of delivering sustainable somatic resources to global humanity. We can strengthen our emergent neurological, physiological capacities easily and without any extensive education or years and years and years of meditation. We can share them with others. Find a comfortable place to sit next to somebody else. And for a very short time, one person is going to be the practitioner and the other person is going to be the recipient, and then we'll switch. The person, just select who's the practitioner initially, who's the recipient, Yes, it's great to do it with someone you know or you don't know. It doesn't really matter. The practitioner is going to place his or her hands on the top of the shoulders. May I demonstrate on you, Kosha, for just a moment? Yes. Oh, here, you stand here. So this is what it looks like. I am about to take the burden of over-responsibility off of Kosha's shoulders. So all I'm doing is placing the tips of my hands at the very top of her shoulders. This site is called unloading. The palm of my hand rests on another site, which opens up her chest, opens up her respiratory functions, and of course also opens up her heart. The heart and the lungs occupy the emotional territory of the body. They go together. So respiratory conditions are always reflective of emotional conditions as well. But we resolve them simultaneously. And it's the touch, which is not pressure, which is not rubbing, which is not tapping, but it's also my awareness. Nothing fancy. I'm just present to this contact. Taking off the burden of over-responsibility so that we can fulfill what is truly our responsibility and not be distracted by what is not. That's known as focus. So that's what we're going to do. Take off the burden of over-responsibility for one and then the other, and then have a brief conversation about that experience. Express gratitude. Can you two do it for each other? Yeah. And let's allow the room to be silent so the treatment can have the greatest space. And bring in the possibility of receiving Polly's transmission for you. And whenever you're ready, reverse, change roles. And know that you can do this again for anyone, anywhere, anytime. and release when you're ready, and just share briefly gratitude and anything that arises that you'd like to communicate in your partnership.
This afternoon, or was your workshop?
It was yesterday. Yeah. I have some books, but
I had a card this morning. I drew, what do I need to serve better? And the challenge was overextension. And it's just so beautiful. You're just like...
I think the very act of doing it made me feel like what is my responsibility or what's my purpose.
we need to bring ourselves back into our group. Focus. You only have 5 more minutes. And yes, did you have... Oh, yes, you're signaling, huh? So ready to answer your questions. Do you need me? Can I do something for you? I know about overextension. I want to thank you, each and every one of you. You are bringing me into my true leadership. I want to thank you. You are bringing me into my true leadership. It's you and the mother. Together. You are evolving me. Please evolve each other in the same way. We are here to fulfill the purpose for which we were born. And that purposefulness is encoded in the cellular structure of our bodies. It unfolds from our connective tissue just as we unfold out of connective tissue at conception. Every stage of development unfolds more of the information about who we truly are. In the open space group that I was in with Dave yesterday, there was an emphasis on imparting to growing communities of people the tools for decarbonizing the inner climate. How can we share with people the ways to clear the static, the corrosion, off of these channels that get interrupted by trauma, by shock, by the fossil fuel industry in its many forms? They will not win. They will not win. No. But we have to do our inner work. Those of us who have that path, I'm one of them. We want to be able to step into leadership. You're helping me do this so I can deliver better and better and better what has been imparted to me. So that's part of what the follow-on is for some of us. Others will find their purpose, their path, whether it be the legal path, whether it be the creative path, whether it's writing a novel. It's apparently not my path at this moment, but later, Margaret assures me, I will still get to write that novel. Whatever your path is, you want to focus on it. Set your boundaries, make it happen. Find the mechanisms that exist within your body. Listen to your body. Find the tools that help you. Listen to your body. Deborah's movement experiences have been an ally for me in listening in different ways, in deeper ways to my body. Listen to your body. Learn. If you don't know how, learn how. Your guidance is in your body. We're going to be moving into experiences in nature. This is your nature. So the nature of your body is going to interact magnificently with the mother in her multitudinous forms. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. It was so beautiful. I feel very much more relaxed and fluid and flexible and everything else, and calm and confident and all those nice things. I've been trying to remove the burden of responsibility from Kosha's shoulders for years, and you've shown me how to do it in 5 minutes. It's fantastic. That's an outcome of the conference for me. Great. Thank you. Fantastic. So you've also got books. You haven't written a novel yet, but you have written books, and which are for sale downstairs?
A few books at the bookstall, and there's also a deck of cards, if there are any left, that educate you and give you an oracle. I created this to make it easier so that you create a treatment for yourself using all these sites. There's my book on shock. There's a book on neurodiversity, which I would love to speak to at some point. And there's a book on war trauma, how war comes home.
Thank you. Yeah. So before we go too much more into the exercise we're going to set up for you in nature, just need to make a couple of more announcements. So one is that the Gaia Pavilion, if you haven't yet encountered it or come across it, it's just outside here, and it is a place where you can make art. So if you feel like a need to express yourself more in an artistic fashion, there are materials there, there are artists there who can support you. It's just outside the Universal Hall here, so that's available all the time. And Jerome has lost a pink iPhone. It was here before the break. It's not here anymore. So if you see a pink iPhone, I was just thinking maybe your pink iPhone has found Susie's white iPhone, and they're in little kind of iPhone heaven somewhere together. But it would be very nice if they found their way back to their respective owners. I'm sure that would also be a relief. And just again to flag, because we won't meet again here to explain the flow of the day. After lunch, you can go meditate in the upper CC, but here we will be sitting in emergent space, and part of that emergence will definitely involve catalyzing conversations and actions, the things that were bubbling from yesterday. It's going to be partly, at least, action-focused around what are the conversations we need, what are the networks that we are already aware of, what are the catalyzing actions that we want to start to take to bring this impulse forward from the conference. So that's going to be part of what will be emergent here, and other things will also emerge because it's emergent. So we'll see what else is carried by the field. So the last part of the morning now, yes, you have a question to that? Yeah.
Maybe the opportunity, if I may use the microphone.
I don't know what you're going to say, but I'm sure you can.
It's about the group that gathered yesterday on concrete projects. We are going to meet in the community center in the back room during lunch.
Oh, great.
So if anyone wants to join, please come there.
Thank you. Yeah, also after lunch would be great to hear from you here. Practical question? You found somebody's glasses. If you find anything, I think it's good to give it to the ushers. And then there is a lost property box, I think, just outside, but give it to the ushers and it'll find its way to the lost property area. Thank you. Great. So part of our resilience is the kind of practice that Stephanie just taught us and guided us through. And part of our resilience is also our relationship to this, to Mother Earth, to the land. And many of you have done land-based work, nature-based work. And we just want to give you an opportunity to feel your connection to this land and to go for a walk in a moment in a more kind of mindful way than you might normally walk. So often we go out into nature and we kind of go for a stroll and we're kind of chatting to people and it's nice, but we don't really notice where we are. So we want to invite you into a more meditative, mindful walk. And maybe you also want to carry a question on your walk that you could see if nature reflects back to you some kind of response to the question you might carry. You might metaphorically, in a way, crystallize a question and then put it in your back pocket. So it's there, but it's not, you're not walking with it as a thought, thinking about this question. It's just there in your back pocket as a reminder of something that you're contemplating. Maybe there's a question that is forming for you. And then we invite you to simply wander and allow your attention to soften, your gaze to soften. Allow your body to find the way that it wants to walk in this direction, now maybe more in this direction, sensing, sensing, sensing. Maybe you notice a spot in nature that you feel like, this is my place for now. And you settle there for a moment. Maybe you settle there for half an hour. Really tuning into your instinctive nature, your instinctive body. And allow yourself to settle maybe. Maybe you walk the whole time. But maybe there's a place that feels like your spot for now. And maybe there's a part of nature or a part of what catches your attention. We might say what flirts with your attention that catches you and you think, there's something about that. And you focus on it, and you focus on it, and you focus on it, and you soften and soften and soften. And maybe it invites the possibility it speaks back something to you. Maybe it's a tree, maybe it's a flower, maybe it's a bird, maybe it's anything that catches your attention that feels like, maybe this is where I'm meant to be. And maybe there's a message from nature for me at this time. And maybe later you notice it might be a response to the question you've been carrying in your back pocket. Who knows? But yesterday Visulela said to us, we need to love the land. We need to love the land. So this is an opportunity to love the land. To soften. Maybe you want to walk barefoot. Polly Higgins used to walk barefoot often. Just to kind of feel the earth under your feet. Maybe you want to walk barefoot outside. And soften and feel and love the land. Love the land. So allow yourself to be guided intuitively. What feels right for you? Which direction? What's flirting with you? What question might you carry at this time? And if you want to walk with somebody, walk with somebody. If that feels like you're calling for now, walk with somebody. If you want to walk alone, walk alone. But our invitation is to leave the hall as much as you can in silence and just to carry that impulse into nature. And I'm going to share with you a small poem from Mary Oliver to kind of set you on your way. And then we will resume as a whole group here at 8 o'clock this evening. You will decide whether you wish to meditate or come here for the action-focused emergent space. There's workshops also after that and dinner after that. But here's a poem. There's a question. Yeah.
So there's an invitation after your walk in nature. From 1 to 2, I'm opening space in front of Crystal, my workshop. You can create mosaic art, and that's our gift back to the conference. And that if you have that nature connection, is to express that in art, and we leave this as a gift here for the foundation and a gift from the conference.
Beautiful. Thank you. And that's what time again? 1 till 2? In Crystal, which is behind the community center. You can ask any of us who live here if you want to know where Crystal is. Great. Let's just take a moment to sink into that space of sensing and feeling, of mindfulness, of loving the land. Who made the world? Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who has flung herself out of the grass. The one who is eating sugar out of my hand. Who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down. Who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who has flung herself out of the grass. The one who is eating sugar out of my hand. Who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down. Who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? So we invite you to take your one wild and precious life out into nature, out into the land, to love the land, to open to the possibility the land and nature has something to sing back to you at this time. Enjoy your walk, and we will meet again soon.